All right. So, those who don't know my obnoxious voice,
Hello.
I am BTO Pro. Of course, I click a link that just says hello. I work at Pennsylvania State University, the E-Learning Institute, and I work on a platform that you see right there, the ELMS Learning Network. Is a psychotic idea that I had one day about 4 years ago. And so here we are with what we're going to show. Michael Potter is also in the room.
Hello.
I tricked him into accepting work in this line of thought, and so yes, I'm paying him obviously. And so he also doesn't sleep in obsession of whatever cool things we're able to produce with this platform. If you are unfamiliar, you can go to ELMSLN.org and see all the details that we have publicized there, as well as blog posts and things. Hopefully be redoing this site in a bit. There's the chat box, so this is a demo as well as just kind of testing out this technology with the live stream. So if you have any questions or you want to see certain aspects of what I'm going to go through, please feel free to ask through there. This is also being recorded, so we'll be able to refer back to it later after I crop out the first 8 minutes where I just keep saying test, and I can't believe how hard this was to set up. So let's just dive into it a bit. If you haven't seen ELMS in a while, well, it looks a heck of a lot different than it once did. So the difference between ELMS and ELMS Learning Network: ELMS is a system from a long time ago, but the name of the initiative lives on, where we're building an educational system to deliver content, whether it's online or augmented classroom type of a setup. Why it's called Learning Network is it's actually a lot of different systems powering an experience. It's much more of an ecosystem-driven approach to systems design. Why you should care about that as an educator is that means that we can create crazy idea, plus one, and keep moving and innovating without having to wait 4, 5, 6 months to be able to roll out and test changes. So this lets us be a lot more agile, lets us build a lot more faculty-centric types of experiences. And so, we kind of center things around the course and just throw another system at it to get additional functionality in there. This approach isn't terribly novel. It's something we kind of borrowed from Google. And so just briefly glancing at like Google Plus, the way that they roll out applications, right, we don't even think about it, is kind of got this other bar, and we've got, hey, here's all my other stuff. You skip between these, they go to different domains, you don't ever think about where you are. And they haven't fully unified this pattern, they're getting there. You see color changes to indicate what it is I'm working with. If I'm getting into collections, right, I have a lower level navigational element, but even if I bounce between different domains or applications, say I go to YouTube, there's an expectation that I'll just be logged in. Now they haven't fully unified their branding and stuff. I think they're transitioning there, but generally speaking, navigation is on the left, items flow down the side, across the top there's search, there's some menu items beneath here. I always know who I am and I have notifications. Those are generally in the top right corner, as well as an action that I can take. And if I go back to YouTube, you'll see that's generally, or sorry, not YouTube, Google Plus, that's generally holding true, right? They kind of bounce between UI patterns, sometimes things change color, right? So they're clearly trying to shift towards this type of methodology as well. So we're doing that as well. If you think of course experience, and so I have here is a course website, right? Instead of a traditional learning management system, we're basically creating a course home. This is something Paul Hibbets has kind of been pioneering a bit. He's a faculty member at another college, who has been saying, hey, instead of burying all my content and experience in a learning management system, why don't I put it in a content management system, and then I'll link people off to where they need to go when they need to go there. So we're basically doing the same thing, but it's powered by Drupal instead of his work is powered by Grab CMS. And so you can see I am here, just getting a brief tour of what our interface is, who I am, where am I. We're working hard on the where am I type of a question, but See, we have pictures for each course that can be uploaded. We've got a breadcrumb trail of where I am in this course, items that I can immediately go to relative to what I'm viewing, as well as being able to drill down into the material itself. We also use color to emphasize what aspect of this course you're working with. And so if you're used to a learning management system, you might be familiar with, buttons that are assumed to be other little applications, whether it's discussion forums or what have you, list of media assets, things like that. We're currently working on kind of shifting some of these elements actually out onto the UI. There's some prototypes in our issue queue about that. But so, see, because we're taking this crazy idea plus one approach, for example, working on a portfolio system, a portfolio compliance system. And so this could be a location for all of the assets being generated across every system that's in use. And I say every system that's in use, hopefully you didn't notice, but you may have, that I went to a different domain right there. I was automatically logged in. It still knows who I am. It knows my role. We've changed the color and added some iconography to imply, hey, you're working on the compliance of your portfolio. But generally, we've kept the same UX patterns, right? I can edit things by going to the top right. I can change my universal preferences in the top right here. I can edit things relative, if I'm an admin, I can dig into the guts of what to edit about this course at this level. I can get a listing of all assets, right? And so this would be, I'm jumping out of the mindset of I'm in this course. So you notice the banner changes because I'm not in a course right now. But I could jump over to a different course. And so if we went to like Music 7, right? I have a different banner now. My working context is Music 7. You'll see there aren't any assets related to this at the moment. But my navigational elements have changed. And so now, a second ago, I had links off to Canvas over in this side. We actually have 2 LMSs at the moment as we phase one out. But this course also doesn't have a studio. There was a studio link in the other one. And so the idea is that we're kind of creating these very specific to what the needs of that course are, learning environments, but the system is actually able to do that. And so ELMSLN.org, you can get more information about how to actually stand this up. We basically have a one-line copy and paste this into a terminal installation routine and walks you through how to do some other things. But let's see, we've made great strides as far as the accessibility as well as just like the general context, right? There was a time I was actually just reviewing some of my older demos. What I just showed you, I would have typed in about 10 URLs to go to. Is now pretty, recognizable as a system you would use and hopefully get comfortable with. See, some other people are saying hi on the live stream, so that's neat. So our authoring experience, right, is, again, this is all powered by Drupal. To a lot of people, it doesn't look like Drupal because we made it not suck. Would you say that's the technical term, Potter?
Yeah, it's technical.
Yeah, it's
jargon.
It's technical jargon, but we've made Drupal suck significantly less than it typically does. So none of this may look and feel like Drupal, with the exception of, there's a CK editor here, and we've got Node, 687. But this is actually a lot of different Drupal sites across a bunch of different domains. And so this is a typical Node edit form, if you're familiar with Drupal. You see we have lots of flexibility as far as what you can define here. I could say what a topic level banner is and upload a banner that would then sit here, and I'll actually show a course in a little bit that does that. What the visibility of this is, right? Whether we hide this material or not. Some instructional strategies. In the future, we're getting into competencies for competency-based education being kind of layered over top of this across systems. As well as defining what the instructional significance of this is, which is related, right? You could potentially in the future, instead of just saying this is a discussion, actually select discussion and have it say, would you like to associate a discussion here? You also notice we have some auto-saving, right? So it noticed I made a change of any kind and it saved the state. Some other minor UX things, you see the bar sticks with me and floats as I come down. This breadcrumb trail is interactive, so I can step back through the levels of where I am, or to the highest level to see the entire outline of this course. There's also a contextual add button at the bottom right. A lot of these conventions are taken from Google. It's using their material design standard. It's not exactly that. It's how closely does materialized CSS follow that, though?
Pretty closely.
I mean, it's using materialized CSS. It's at least trying to mimic what Google does and do it in an open source way that's repurposable. You can see we have previous and next buttons for stuff. Unfortunately, there's some Flash content linked from somewhere else. Some of that's still laying around. But you'll notice, because this material is delivered from somewhere else, and this is kind of a key principle to ELMS Learning Network, I can see that this is being delivered from somewhere else, and we can create links off to editing just this specific item. And so because you've got this distributed network approach, what you're able to do is then we use these network-driven tokens. And so Drupal interprets the token in such a way that it knows what to talk to and how to render the thing on the other side. We use this principle all over the place to render media, or links to doing submissions of assignments in our studio application. And so basically these tokens, which can be generated from anywhere, if I click this, that's what this little thing is, it's a share widget. The system will tell me every possible way I could remix and deploy this exact thing somewhere else. And so these tokens can then be thrown effectively anywhere, and the tokens can be read off as basically a web service query. And so we're able to, if you read them, see connect to the MOOC, that's what this is called, Massively Open Online Course Distribution. Give me item 694. I want you to have the title be this. It's a node. Give it an icon of page view and render it as a side nav. And I'm going to copy that. A side nav is basically a flyout. And so if I were to copy that and paste it somewhere else, I'm going to cheat for a second. I don't want to paste that into content in a running space, but you can see what that code would look like. So I might go and click the template button, right? We've got a whole bunch of different templates. Again, this is just using different tool sets you have available to you in Drupal. We're just setting it all up ahead of time so it's ultra flexible. But so you can see I could throw down a flex video, or I could throw down a vocabulary list, or a materialized card, that's from materialized CSS, or a topic reading list. Let's put in like secondary sources. So you can see we kind of throw in some prefab HTML elements, like test element there. See what that source looks like. You see it's basically created a accessible version of something based on the materialized CSS style guide. Things and stuff. Some other templates we have going on in there. We've got like a paper stack, a vocab list, right? So you've got these little kind of widgety elements you can throw in. Again, because it's Drupal, we can add kind of whatever we want. It's part of the point of the platform. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to hope it's going to be okay with querying itself for that. You generally don't embed pages into themselves. Isn't that a good rule of thumb, Potter?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it actually didn't. It didn't want to render that token as a result of that.
Hey, we blocked recursion.
Hey, we blocked recursion. Yeah, that's always a good thing. So delete that little element there. This action cannot be undone. You always got to have an aggressive, over-the-top warning message for when something's about to occur. So that's a music course. Let's bounce somewhere else though. Let's go to, you see we hook this up to an LRS, and so I can go to Learning Record Store. This is a different platform, right? This is something ELMS Learning Network plugs into, and the methodology really empowers you to take advantage of. So Learning Locker is an open source learning record store that you ship XAPI statements over to. And I'm not going to I'm going to actually open this off screen and go to an interface so you can see it. I want to make sure there isn't any sensitive data on the page. Oh, no, that's fine. Okay. So you can see this is an example of some of the data that you would see there, right? Say, hey, we've got all these statements. And so it gives you a high-level collection of this stuff. Learning record stores operate under the idea that you can basically decentralize learning and learning outcomes by having a dedicated bucket to ship all of your analytics to. And so this tool basically just sits there, it does high-level analysis like this, like, hey, you had 350 learners generate statements today, which is pretty sweet. So we are collecting a lot of statements, holy crap. My instance here, I don't ever check in on this display, but my instance has 233,000 statements now. And 163 different people generated 11,000 of them today. So that's a little ridiculous. You move this off screen again so you can take a look at what one of those statements are. I'm going to, okay, good. Vagrant is full of junk statements. And so this is hooked up to a Vagrant image. We kind of use this for testing purposes. If you're not familiar with Vagrant, it's kind of a server that you can throw up off your local machine. You run a command, it spins up. Virtualization is a wonderful thing. So you can see that I made a quiz and it submitted a attempted that I interacted with it, and my item was, is Apple crappy now? Very professional as always, my test data is. But what an XAPI record looks like is this, right? So you've got, hey, this was a about content item ID number 3 in this location, right? It's a XAPI is who did what, when, where type of a thing, and some context and basically, authority, like who says this is fine, kind of a deal. You can see we mix in custom metadata into our XAPI statements that are emitted, and this gives us greater context so we can pull it back in later in other parts of the system, which I'll show in a minute. But you can see we track the section of the person that generated the statement, what course they were in, the title of the page they were on, what that item is, as a full qualified link, the role they had, and then an ELMSLN session value, which is a PHP session variable. This would allow us to track, if we haven't built the interface for it yet, but if access, whether it's public, which would get into the massively open online course type of stuff, or requires a login, or limiting it to my students so we can hook it up to rosters, things like that. But what we're going to pick is, I could do blog, course, discussion. I was skipping Innovate for right now. But basically, by checking these boxes, I'm creating other nodes in ELMS Learning Network where nodes are parts of a course, right? So kind of like when you set up your Google account and you say, like, I want a YouTube channel, imagine that it's the equivalent of that. Like, they're creating you a little container type of a space. So I'm going to click Create Course, and it will say, hey, I told it to do this, I'll let you know when it's done. And so what this did here, from a technical level, is we've got Drupal saying, hey, I've got a new node, and it's called New Demo, and now I've associated 4 other nodes to it, and those other nodes are called service instances, and one node is that it's got a studio, and one node is it's a discussion board, a course space, and a blog. And so what happened behind the scenes, as that is waiting to refresh, is it's created a file on the server right there. So we've got these 4 files hanging out. Then there's a task runner that comes along and notices the file, picks it up to process it. But to see what one of those looks like, give it to your courses, you'll see it's stamped out new demo. It's a new demo from my information. It generates what the addresses of this should be, and then it basically, because it's Drupal and it's created automation, it just runs a whole crap ton of drush functions. And so it's going to run through and play all of these in the correct order. You see it's already started on discussions, which under the hood reads like this. Visually, you see, hey, I'm installing discussions right now. And so I'll let that go in the background. We can bounce around with some other stuff. So I'm in my production CIS there. network, and let's go to like our asset management system. And so our asset management system, again, hey, do you know how to use it? Well, if you know how to use any other system in ELMS, then you should, right? It's got the same general design conventions. I'm not currently viewing the assets of any one course, right? So I've got kind of a global banner. We want a better one than that, obviously. But I'm seeing all the assets that are in this media system. If I want to add new ones, I hit this, and there's a ton of different options of different types of media that I can add. If I want to search through what we have already, and say, show me all the images, right? Step through. If I want to, let's go to this one. Right, so you can say, what are all the different ways that I could present this to people? And so you see we've got all these different image styles running on the side. I'd say I want it as an image that has a caption with it, right? Or as a right justified light boxed image, or as a circle, or any combination of them, as a card, right? This is like a materialized function, right? Maybe parallaxed. You know, if I want, there's this guy looking at someone staring at you between the screens there. Or if I want it as part of a gallery, whatever it is, right? So let's say it was a parallax lightbox image that then when they clicked, it would pop up and show them the full thing. I hover over this and click the button, which is going to actually copy a token for me. And we'll go back to, actually, do that. Let's go to like our list of courses and find a course that could throw this in. So we could go to like Theater 105. Right? You see we have a banner to know that we're someplace else. We've got all these sections of material. The sections relate to getting students access to things. So I'm going to throw a blank piece of content in here. Media text. And throw down that token so we can see what it looks like. Oops, so I didn't edit that in. No. Put some stuff after it. Use source just to make sure I didn't goof it up too badly. Right. Again, fairly readable. Connect to the media system. Give me item 567. Render it as image parallax lightboxed using this wonderful display mode inheritance thing that Potter wrote. And so it will then connect, and what you didn't see happen, right? As it goes, it connects to the media system. It says, hey, give me this stuff, and then render it as this, and it injects it in place of it. Because we know where it is laid down, right? I can see the whole thing here, and I can edit this in place, which actually will then, for watching the addresses, jump me over to the exact spot in the media system that this happened, right? You can see there's a caption placed here, but there's also a figure label associated. And so I don't know if they wanted to do both, but alt text would be a good thing to have for this. So picture Walter Benjamin looking off into the distance. Is that quality? What's quality alt?
I mean, we could massage a little bit.
Always good to have citations TPD when you're developing something. So I'm going to save that. And what ended up happening is it bounced me back to where I was. So we're maintaining context across systems. And the critical aspect of this, being multiple systems, is if we can streamline the jumps between systems, the accounts, the visuals of how to do what you're doing. Eric, you just work in a bad building. That's why you're buffering and the audio is fuzzy like that. If we're able to streamline those hops between systems, it won't feel like lots of systems anymore. But it'll still give us the architectural superiority over any other system that would ever be created otherwise. Because from a scale perspective, I could jump over to the media system. All right, why do we care about that? Well, that can be easily migrated to another location. It already is in another location. All calls for that data are happening via web services, which means it can be picked up and moved anywhere else, a different IP address. It can be scaled a lot higher than other systems if it needs to. And it's not going to invoke downtime or bog me down associated with this content system. Now you might say, well, that content has to be there, otherwise it's going to go away, and you're right at some level. But it makes migration and scaling a lot easier to plan than having everything go down at once. Also, we can push rather radical changes to one aspect of the platform without implementing issues with other parts. Potter, can you think of anything that we're doing radical right now?
No, it's usually pretty vanilla stuff.
Yeah, pretty vanilla.
We are implementing a new Angular interface on our studio. That might be a good one.
Yeah, I've heard of Angular before. So, thing he's referring to is DMD. Well, I have it implemented in DMD 201. It's, of course, we're actively building out. This is a space we're creating for students. They haven't started using it yet. But from the data level, you'll see we've got a studio. We've got a course content space. I could also access this from the network side, where the network says, hey, go to course content. And so you might go through the content. You'll see we have some read time analytics. These are auto-generated, so it's calculated that there's 53 minutes worth of reading. I have a feeling, though, if I rebuild this, it's going to be a lot higher, so let me rebuild that. What rebuilding the read time does is it analyzes the content, there we go, analyzes the content for word count, as well as videos, and then data mines off of those videos how long they are to generate how long it should take to do this course. That'll be critical when meshing it up with XAPI data. We'll show in a minute, but since I was talking about crazy stuff that Potter and I have been actively working on, we can go to the studio to see crazy. So I'm somewhere else entirely. We're in a studio environment in this case. We're working on kind of this Kanban board type of scenario. And one of the key differences between this and everything else that you saw is this isn't Drupal anymore. I mean, it is, sort of. So to make changes in a safe space, yeah, you can see I'm waiting on that. Well, it hasn't installed Studio for this fake space yet in the background. So let me open a different course in my play space, just so I don't goof anything up. Right, so this is a play space. I can do whatever here. I could create a new project and stuff, right? Hey, project updated. I can add an assignment. I could upload a photo by dragging and dropping it up there if I wanted to. And stuff. And I can set some of the settings. I'm not going to really go into all of the settings that we have in the studio because we're still working through them, but things like whether or not people can submit this only after it's been submitted or if it's a closed interaction with just the faculty, whether things should be allowed to be late, what kind of critique methodology to use, if there's allowed one at all, right? And then it changes the statement based on my settings as to what I would see. I can set due dates, things like that. What's so important about what I just did there is if you know Drupal, Drupal's UX patterns are not that slick. And so I can go in to add an assignment, and I could then submit this assignment. Right? Just put things and stuff. So I made an assignment pretty quickly, made that submission pretty quickly, and a project pretty quickly. What it did behind the scenes, though, because that was all Angular. Angular running inside of Drupal, talking to it via web services. And so because Potter's banged his brains out learning Angular the last 3 months now, he's nodding, yes, the last 3 months now teaching himself Angular, is that created a project node, an assignment node, and a submission node, and did all of the data modeling correctly as if it had been done through a traditional Drupal UI. But it wasn't done through a traditional Drupal UI, which means we can start to add all kinds of better usability and UX patterns because we've got this, again, using Materialize, so it looks generally like everything else we make. It just looks like it's a lot easier to use. It's so confusing that it's so fast I can bounce around through things, or I could edit things logically when I should be allowed to edit them by clicking on them, right? Or save them, right? So we're still actively pursuing this, but the thing that's so groundbreaking about this is it's actually running inside of Drupal, and people aren't going to know it, which means we can start to hollow out other parts of the user experience across the platform and have it be delivered via Angular, which will allow for a lot smoother usability patterns. But people won't have to, there won't be this abrupt change like they're going somewhere else, right? We can kind of layer it in on top of what we've already been working on. Potter, you got anything else to add on your Angular baby?
No, that's pretty good. I would say that.
You're a man of so many words.
No, this obviously opens up a whole new realm of possibilities that we can do. I mean, whenever you sit down with a faculty member or instructor, an IB, they have very specific pedagogical, constructs that they're thinking about. They have workflows. They have, groups, like who's working with who, at what time they're working with who. These are extremely complex workflows that we expect our LMS to provide. So, by abstracting this from the traditional Drupal UI, it's going to be possible, which is awesome. And because the whole platform is built on web services, so that it adds on a whole new layer. For instance, I'm currently testing this out in a course, and whenever the students submit to these assignments, it's actually creating nodes on a separate blog that's on a separate URL and posting them to a separate blog so that they can go and comment on each other's stuff. So it's not just things happening in this studio. It's things being submitted to the studio that are then being pushed out through the system, which is really exciting.
Yeah, so that was a good point. I skipped that part. But Michael, sorry, I should say Michael, it's being very formal, is referring to is that the entire principle of the system and it being a network is that everything is accessible via web services. And so we've actually got 3 different types of APIs, whether it's a front end or kind of internal API, but this is the Angular one that we've been working on. And so the idea is that anything that you saw generated via front end is easily accessible as data through here. And so it's actually not assignments, right? It's CLE/assignments. And so he can then construct his application to just target, hey, API v1 CLE assignments endpoint, I need you to give me everything you have. The Drupal side can then manage the permissions of that and say, oh, here's the return data. You should only be able to see these. And then we kind of create this common language between Drupal and the Angular application, which then allows him to build the Angular application without having to ever touch any Drupal development workflows other than, oh, hey, can you make the commenting style instead of it being, if you're familiar with Drupal, like field _ comment _ style UND 0 array position, blah, blah, blah. You can just say, hey, can you make it output as the word comment style? And then the options can be delivered, from Drupal, so we can actually kind of do our data modeling in Drupal and on a whiteboard, and then have Angular be able to talk to that very easily. It also, you can see we have other endpoints for things, like I could say, oh, well, there's assignment 6. All right, well, give me CLE assignments, and then number 6, that would just be the 6th one. And then we can also add in other stuff, kind of abstracting the logic away from the app. Like, can the user create this? Can they delete this current thing? Is it currently after the due date of this item? What's the reason they can open it or do this? Well, the assignment has no due date, right? So we can get pretty detailed as to what we give people access to.
One more thought on this. This isn't just for Angular. We're using Angular for some of our stuff, but this is for, if you have a professor that needs, sends in a request and it's like, I just need one status indicator to just show up on this page. Can you just do that? Well, since we're outputting everything through web services, you could just put like a one-line jQuery thing that just quickly, every time this page loads, go to this RESTful endpoint and get the status and return it. So it doesn't mean that you have to create full applications. This is helpful for really a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I forgot about your blog use case, and what he's referring to with the blog use case. Let me see if this is done in the background here. right? So all the aspects of my new network have been built. Go and check out new network. Might have to log in the first time that happens. Times you can see, hey, I got blog, discussion, and open studio. And so what he was referring to is that because these are all web service driven, and I've got a new studio space where spin that up and say, hey, start making new projects. On the one hand, this also helps limit the scope of what that application needs to be. And so we can roll out this open studio thing to just this one space and know that it's dedicated to creating projects and it is dedicated to creating assignments and submissions, which are 3 unique types of constructs instead of managing users and how do they see sections and how do they get access to this, right? Kind of the ELMS architecture takes care of all of those questions. But because it's web services, he's saying, oh, okay, well, he adds a custom model that says, well, when they do a submission here, I actually wanted to publish it over here. And so they've got it published in their blog. Doesn't look anything like ours because another advantage of the architecture is if you want to do the crazy +1 type of a thing, this is still Drupal at the end of the day. You can crack open the hood, you could change the theme, and do whatever you want. But it's just going to influence this one aspect of this one course. And so we can experiment. We have 2 different versions of the studio right now. We were able to run one version of the studio for a few classes while actively building out this other version of the studio. You're not going to be able to do that and roll it in the same environment with the same linkage and things like that if you're anywhere else. So, again, instead of thinking like, oh, this has just a blog and this has discussion boards being built out, think of it more of like this is a platform for building lots of things, right? And I don't know where we're going to be a year from now. If you've been following this project at all, you'll know that it looked horrible. Let's say horrible is the right word. Even so much as a year and a half ago, because a lot of it was in the architecture under the hood to go and do all of the automation so that as I'm talking about whatever in the background, that just made hundreds of database tables because it made 4 unique Drupal sites. It then flavored them to look the right way and have the right module configuration. It then synced across all of any potential sections or user accounts that there would be. And then it called home and said, hey, I'm built. So you can imagine that was a lot of stuff to do as one person. I don't know, before Potter showed up on the project. But so because we're kind of automating away all of that stuff, it's going to really let us start to build more slick, complex types of things without them actually appearing complex to end users. What's another aspect of this? It's always fun.
I'm sorry, dude. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Well, that would be one of the aspects, actually, which is why I made it trigger that. So I've invested a lot of time in accessibility and different types of, basically I need to have fun instead of when I work till 2 in the morning, just, to make this thing do crazy stuff for several years. I need some wake myself up in the morning crazy projects. And so one of those is making the browser be able to talk to me, among other things. That message go away. And so this, if you notice, I've occasionally clicked the button that says authorize this domain. There's been this little thing here. If you think of HAL 2000 that's just listening to me all the time, that's actually what that error message comes from. Is from A Space Odyssey. But we've got kind of this hidden layer of stuff going on. I didn't touch the accessibility preferences we have. Can you give me a power cord? So I'm not plugging. I have another one in my bag if you need it. Sorry, I got to plug in my computer here. So the fans are going to blow up. But we've got all these different preferences geared around accessibility. So put a lot of time and effort into making this thing not just accessible. Actually, this is a presentation circuit I've been running where we don't want to make things just accessible because that would just be is tab order appropriate? We want to actually bring a lot of the usability enhancements that different people of different conditions have and kind of raise awareness of that as well as make it something that everyone can benefit from. So for example, under interface, I can adjust the size of this automatically, nothing crazy there. I can do high contrast mode, which jacks the contrast up between elements. I've used this at times for testing to ensure there is an appropriate level of contrast between things. We could also invert colors, right, which is kind of the turn the lights out mode. It needs to be applied a little more globally, but it does the best job it can via, these are just CSS and JavaScript. So we can also disable interface animations. We can optimize fonts for people who have dyslexia. So I click that, and it's going to load in a font called Open Dyslexic. And then, I would get to the end, I hit next page. I was going to store that setting and then apply it across every place I go. So now when I go to the blog, see the blog also is keeping track of my Open Dyslexic font. Right? And it's these little things that we can layer in, and you can see, dyslexic font applied to the Angular app because it's a very aggressive selector. You see, I have to do it, against that font because I haven't actually tested that. It's these little things where you have, a setting that may keep itself across contexts where it starts to feel less like 4 applications and more like one unified one. And so I can go to interface, we'll do optimize, disable that, right, and set the fonts back to normal. I've also got continuous listening mode, which is on right now, which means ELMS has been listening to and processing my voice the entire time. So I kind of call it the creepy NSA mode. So I'm going to turn on a debugging module so that you can see what it's processing as it tries to make matches. Now it slows down the accuracy of it a bit, but it's kind of cool. So to show you, I could edit, turn that on via the ELMS UI if I wanted to, or I could do, hey, I've heard of that little guy, Drush, courses dot new demo en voice commander devil. Is the name of it. Hey, this will enable voice commander demo. Cool. That now. Going to hit refresh on this, and we should see my voice start to show up in this as I talk. So this is why we call creepy NSA stalker mode. So it is actually listening, and it's listening for key commands to be triggered. This uses something called Anyang, which is a wrapper on top of something that's just baked into a lot of browsers now, a lot of WebKit-based browsers, in which it has support for the voice synthesis API as well as the, I can't remember the other one at the moment. It's like speech processing API or something. But it's able to ship your voice off to another location in order to process it and return the response. And so what we'll do is we've been able to then wire, using Anyang, we've been able to wire that up to commands. So if I hit Control and it's the Alt, we can see what some of those commands are that are kind of hidden under there. Right? And you see it also tries to do guesses. Right? Now I'm over HTTP. If you're on HTTPS, this is a lot more accurate. I might actually switch to a real course space because of that. That's actually, we do that right now. I'll go to an art history course. I mentioned a banners thing before. This would be a content-specific banner, right? So that then anywhere within that material, if we go to ancient Egypt, we've again got the ancient Egypt banner. This is being delivered from the iCourse system, right? So it's a timeline that's been built in the system, being delivered from somewhere else. Again, leveraging the notion that the system can kind of do whatever it wants whenever you have the ability to make anything elsewhere. And so students could click through this or whatever, but that wasn't the point of why I was going to this. So let's go to just a normal page here. Right? And I have to close other windows because this is about accuracy. Open preferences. Open interface. Do that. Oh, it's alternate formats is one of them. Alternate formats. Speed reader. Open speed reader. Speed reader play. So what I did right there is touch on another part of this system we have baked in here is something called speed reader, which is an accessible technology that's meant to kind of hack reading. And so it doesn't make a ton of sense with this specific thing here. But if we went to something that had a lot of text, there isn't a lot of text in this course, so that's not making as much sense. We can do speed reader, play, right? And so if you just look at the red letter, it's actually bringing it to you, and then what you can do is jack up your rate of reading to try and defeat your inner voice so that you can read things a lot faster. So we like to play around with lots of prototypey, experiment types of things with that regard. Show options. Hey ELMS, show options. Yeah, now it's going to fail on me. That's the problem when they're wasting them away. Next page. Scroll down. Scroll up. Read to me.
L3.2 Akkad, Lagash, Marie, Babylon. The Assyria page contains overview questions to consider steps to completion in order to complete lesson 3.2 budgeting, your time, overview in the left.
So that's just going to read forever, right? I don't want it to keep doing it. I need to put in support for like pause. I don't have that yet. Potter just held himself back from laughing out loud because he was not aware it did that. So you see, we're always kind of pushing the envelope and adding crazier and crazier stuff to this. This on the right here is an in-page navigational widget that's auto-generated based on the headings of the page. Something else that we're doing, we're setting up support for something that we've kind of deemed as headless authoring. And right now you're not going to see more about that until we have a working Angular app doing it, because we should be able to. We've gotten a lot of the hurdles out of the way to make it possible, but WYSIWYGs are terrible. I don't know if anyone on the feed is aware of that. And that's not something we can really solve without defeating WYSIWYGs entirely. So what you're seeing here, I'm pointing to, is when any content is rendered in ELMS and it detects that you're a staff or admin type of a member, someone that could edit this page basically as a permission, it generates a hash value relative to that paragraph. And so I don't have it wired up right now because I just want to wait till we just make the Angular app. But what we have the back-end scaffolding to do is to target this paragraph so I could click it and say add an image here, and that it would ship along this hash value to our media system or wherever you just were sent to. Now, if we have the Angular app, you just are sending those parameters to the Angular app. The Angular app's using the web services in the background, and then ships over to the media system, which might be something like media.phsid/node/add, something like that, right? Like an API path. When it comes back here, though, is, again, using one of the other web service components, you can see this as JSON. It's going to hit this as JSON, say, oh, I came from item 362. It's going to load up the paragraphs, do the same calculation to say, oh, what was that hash value they clicked on that's specifically related to, right? So we're creating a unique ID for this paragraph. Then what we'll actually be able to do is on the other side say, oh, by the way, remote thing, I want you to inject this token value beneath here because that's what I was instructed to do via click. And if any of that sounded crazy, well, then I hope you're ready for when we have that done in a few months, because I already had a prototype of that working. It just wasn't, I don't like the usability pattern of it yet to push it in here. What else we go? I don't know if I miss anything. Oh, XAPI data. Silly me. We haven't really talked about anything cool yet. So, I mentioned the XAPI data earlier. We're actually tracking basically everything people do, or as much of everything as we can at the moment, and shipping it off to Learning Locker. And so I'm not going to click and expand that views thing until I do this. I can hit privacy settings and say enable the FERPA filter. This is why I haven't been concerned about viewing anything. And so anything, when that's on, anything tagged with this is sensitive FERPA data will auto blur itself out via CSS so that I could give this demo right now, actually. So I could then, I'm not going to jump to that user dashboard, but you see one statement of visited was generated, which means someone clicked on a link on the page, and I knew who they were. I know that they clicked to the art store site. I could click and jump to the thing they clicked, which was off of there, or I could go to the exact statement for this verb, visited, or the user to see everything that they've done. And you'll see blurred out, but the full XAPI statement is there. I obviously don't want to show that and be sensitive user information. But so we're able to start to build visuals off of this, right? The majority of operations on this page have been that people viewed things versus visited them. Now, that doesn't make a whole ton of sense on this page specifically, so let me go to something where it does make sense. This is an art course, and let me make sure I get to a page that has a video on it. We're tracking that people are accessing pages. So every page I've gone to, it's actually emitting a non-blocking call to our Learning Locker instance. So that's why you don't actually experience any of the load of it. It's a very snappy system when I go everywhere. So let's see related data of this page. Hopefully we have some. There we go. So in case you were wondering, 42 of the 64 students that have come to this have actually bothered to hit play. I don't know why that would be useful, but I mean, if you wanted to know if they were actually engaging with your content or not, I guess that would be important. You'll notice, again, I switched to a different course, but it's picked up my permission associated with FERPA settings, and so it's auto-blurred everything here as a result, so I can safely click that and not be too concerned. We can look at the visualization here and see our breakdown, right, of people that have visited the links off of here, right? Only 2 people have clicked the extra links that are on here. So I know like the extra resources that faculty are putting a whole ton of time into on this page aren't being accessed, which would be useful to know. Pausing, I need to make it stop tracking pausing. That has literally no utility whatsoever. But we can see a lot of people are pausing for some reason. 41 of those 64 people have paused. We can see a watch statement, which gets generated from the action of play and then hitting pause later, right? 18 people skipped around in the video, and then we could start to analyze how many people are actually watching the whole thing. If you were curious, 31 of the 64 people that have been here have watched the entire thing because that generates a completed statement. And so I know that 64 people have been here because it says 64 people have viewed it. Well, how do we know they viewed it? Well, they clicked a button that then loaded this page because that kicks off a statement to do it. And there's our 2 remote links, which I can then pop that open and see that there's a thing that says right here, and that just goes to a mental floss article. Actually, both of those go to the same article. So that's what we're doing so far with the XAPI. I have to work on, we've got some filtering for it if I wanted to view it as a bar chart. We could do some simple stuff like that, but we want to be able to distill and make more meaning of these things because right now you can't make a ton of meaning of it, right? It's important to know that like half of the people that have been here bothered to watch a video, so that's very useful, but we could get even more useful information off of it. And we also working on, I have to add the read time stats in there, but that's another aspect of this, is to say, well, how long, soon we'll be able to generate a statement that tracks from the time they start the page to the time they exit the page. It'll kick off a statement, which we could compare to the read time, so we could start to see either if people are just blazing through and don't care about the material, or we could see, hey, it's taking you a little bit longer than the mathematically calculated norm, because let's get started is 1 minute of reading and 21 minutes of video. Well, you've been on this page for an hour. Maybe we should dynamically adjust your settings without telling you to say, hey, you should probably plan about 4 hours to take this next lesson. We don't have that yet, but it's a lot of positioning things. Oh, hi. I see Collins is also on here. Named KMW. Welcome to the live stream. I don't know what else there is. We could go to assessment we're getting into right now. as far as building out quizzes. We have some people building out some quizzes that we're delivering via here for some training courses. This is like, hey, are you authorized to take this shop safety course? And do you know how to use the machines, basically? And so those quizzes would be accessed through our content outline. Another, I think, architecture, I just type it manually. But we've got a survey that's delivered via H5P in some of our courses, which we're then tracking the data via XAPI. So what that looks like, oh, and there's another little data. We've got the LMS name is a token in our system, so we can use these tokens to update stuff in bulk, whenever we're not using Canvas or whatever the case would be. Updated in one place, propagates everywhere type of a thing. And so it's highlighted to me, students don't see this, but highlighted to me to know, oh, you see this because that's a token. But this is an H5P element. If you haven't played with H5P, it lets you build dynamic quizzes and tests and videos and little infographics right in the browser. Output is HTML5. Pretty decent on accessibility. It's always getting better. We've got some ways of accounting for it as well. But again, I could jump to and edit this in place, bounce back here. Also working on the related data from it. So in this case, it's just like, hey, was the orientation clear? Because that would be really useful to know. I can look at the related data, and it's going to do related data of anything that's emitted statements relative to this page. And so in this case, I can see that 67 of the 157 people that came here bothered to give us feedback. And that might, that's actually pretty high, to be perfectly honest. A lot of times when you do surveys in classes, people get a very low response rate. And so looking at a third or so response rate isn't half bad for something that's optional that we really haven't called out, like, hey, you need to do this kind of a thing. Then there's whether they interacted with it, right, and whether they bothered to answer it. So 48 people of 157 answered it, but again, you can see maybe I didn't generate. I think we were doing some testing earlier, because completed would mean the most the most out of that. And then we can also see that 13 people jumped off to external links or whatever. So unless anyone in the feed, who I think I know most of them, have any questions, I think it's kind of a running tour over. We're going to cut a 070 any day now. The code that's in master, if you check out the latest version, is everything that you just saw, because I'm, for the first time ever, running exactly what's in that repository. But if anybody has any questions, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll just cut off the live feed and let this thing save so we can have it historically. Also, if anyone wants to be on the future episodes of this, and that they're driving things, let me know. How can I start using these? I'm not sure what you mean by using these. If you mean the full system, that would be from ELMSLN.org. You can get into the documentation and install guide, and you'll see we have this little widget that builds you a one-line command to copy and paste based on the answers you give. Or you can use Vagrant, which is by far the easiest way to get this up and going. If you meant, because Michael's a faculty member, that he wants to use these in his course, well, they're already there, so teach your course instead of just building them all the time. But if you have any more questions, you can go to elmsln.org. Hopefully I'll reshoot this video in a little bit, because I've got a cool new shirt, and that's always important to highlight. The shirt and the hat. But other than that, thanks for tuning in. First episode.